So my first experience in the 458 Speciale. So the first experience I had was driving it out of the dealership. So let me describe to you what it was like. First off was the sound. So upon startup, the car is very subdued and didn't have that nasty bark of a cold start V12 like the F12 did, which does have its pros and cons. One of the pros is obviously that I won't have to worry about waking up my neighbors or family when starting up the car. But of course, the con is that I can't announce to the world that I'm going to go out for a drive. Funny as that is. But after driving off, though, anything above 2,000 RPM, the exhaust emits a very low and deep growl, which turns into a high-pitched scream as you approach the red line. And it's actually really interesting, comparing that to the Scud, because the Speciale has an underlying bass note that the Scud just didn't have, and that bass note carries through the entire rev range, which gives it a way more throaty, bassy sound. And of course, comparing that to the F12 sound, the Speciale is like a bag of angry bees attacking a giant hornet, buzzing and screaming violently until 9,000 RPM, where it's time to shift gears, and it's very, very angry. The F12 sound changed in pitch as it went up, but the Speciale just got louder and louder as it approaches redline. Now moving on to power, it's another interesting take. I know that the Speciale isn't a slow car by any means, but the F12 is just way more powerful. Because even though that the F12 was heavier than the Speciale, it did have an extra 130 horsepower and an extra 100 pound-feet of torque. And that advantage just gave the F12 a lot more shove. And it's also probably down to the gearing, but it is obvious that the Speciale definitely gets off the line quicker due to its ability to put the power down. But once the F12 gets traction, it will just pull ahead. And I really had to recalibrate when I timed my upshifts, because the engine revs so fast and the gearing is just so short and close together that with the Speciale, I just find myself in the rev limiter if I just am not paying attention. And I've also had to rethink my shift points too, as the engine doesn't change its pitch, much like the F12 does when approaching redline. So I also noticed that there was a small torque plateau, maybe about the last 100 RPMs at the top, as the shove or acceleration definitely reduces during that last 100 RPM. So I have to just rethink it, and I think it would benefit just shifting just shy of the red line, which is very unlike the F12, which would just pull and never stop letting up all the way to red line. So, it's obvious that the Speciale wasn't tuned for straight line speed like the F12. So what is it tuned for? Well, it's going fast around the track. So moving on to handling, now this is the area that the Speciale is miles ahead of the F12 and Scud. The way the front end just darts in left and right makes it feel like just an insanely powerful go-kart. The fast steering is still present, just like the 458 and F12, but due to the new suspension geometry, the steering is just heavier and gives you more of a linear feel and a better connection with the road. You can really feel the tires loading up, and boy, do they load up. The car turns with zero body roll, and the combination of the mechanical grip and those grippy Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s mean that you can really take a corner a little bit too hot, and the car will just grip, and you can get on that power early as well and just rock it out of the corner. Taking a turn too hot in the Scud kind of resulted in the front wheels just skipping around and scrambling for grip, but the Speciale's nose just darts in. It really is unbelievable and gives you confidence to push a little bit harder each time. The Scud had a very light feeling to it, like you were skipping around, but the Speciale just feels planted and glued to the road. With the Speciale, I can definitely tell that the center of gravity is lower than the Scud, which makes the car feel heavy but light, if you know what I mean. Now moving on to brakes, the brakes on the Scud were good, but you really needed to get them up to temperature, as when they were not heated, it felt like, when you were a little kid and you were riding your bicycle in the rain and you were slamming hard on your brakes and it just was not slowing down. It just was kept propelling forward, and that's kind of what the Scud's brakes felt like when you didn't have it up to temperature. But for the Speciale, definitely wasn't like that. the main bragging rights with the Speciale brakes was that it's the same brakes as the LaFerrari, and while I have never driven a LaFerrari yet, I can only imagine that the Speciale stopping power is just better than the LaFerrari just due to the Speciale's lighter weight. You know, the brakes gave me so much confidence approaching a corner, and even if I do go in a little too hot, I know that the front end mechanical grip will allow me to tuck in that nose into the apex. And it's this combination of these things, you know, with the confidence it gives to the driver that really make this car so special. Now, I am sure that the Pista improves on all these fronts, but it is fundamentally a different car due to the change to turbocharging. And I am unsure of what will be next, but I do know that Ferrari will never ever make another naturally aspirated V8 engine ever again. It is just a sign of the times, and while the Speciale will always be special to me, being the last naturally aspirated V8 Ferrari will ever make, it will go down in the history books as a shining example of what Ferrari used to be with their signature high-revving, screaming V8s that produced a noise that will always be Ferrari. But now it will be a Ferrari of the past.